Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I never thought a single night could change everything. But that was before I heard his breathing, steady, deep, and far too close, in the darkness beside me. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to send chills racing down my spine. It was one of those nights when silence feels heavier than words, when every breath and heartbeat carries meaning you can't quite explain. I remember lying there, frozen, wondering how things between us had reached this point, and what would happen next. It had started so innocently. We were just two people trying to help each other through a rough patch in life. He had been my closest friend for years, someone who'd seen me at my worst and never once walked away. When I lost my job and had nowhere else to stay, he offered me a spare room at his apartment. I told myself it was temporary, just until I got back on my feet. But nights have a way of blurring boundaries you thought were clear. The first few evenings were normal, shared dinners, late-night conversations about everything and nothing, quiet laughter echoing through the dimly lit living room. But something changed. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered a little longer when I spoke, or how our shoulders brushed when we sat too close on the couch. It wasn't awkward exactly, it was charged, unspoken. And part of me didn't want it to stop. That night, a storm had rolled in, rain tapping against the window, thunder muttering in the distance. The power went out halfway through a movie, plunging the apartment into pitch-black silence. I could hear him shift beside me, his voice low and calm, telling me not to worry. I remember the warmth of his hand brushing mine for just a second. Then the quiet took over. And that's when I heard it, his breathing, slow and rhythmic, right next to me in the dark. Something about that moment felt irreversible. Like a line had been crossed without either of us saying a word. My heart raced as I tried to steady my breathing, afraid he might hear the tremor in it. I wanted to speak, to break the silence, but every part of me knew that once I did, nothing between us would ever be the same again. When I turned toward him that night, my eyes slowly adjusted to the faint light coming through the window. The power was still out, and the only thing illuminating the room was the soft glow of the moon filtering through the curtains. He was lying there, so still, yet somehow I could feel the tension in the air between us. His eyes were open too, watching me in that quiet way that said more than words ever could. We didn't speak. For a moment, it felt like we were caught between two worlds, one where we were just friends, and another where something far deeper was pulling us closer. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the glass like a heartbeat that matched my own. I wanted to say something, to ask him what this meant, but the words never came. Instead, I turned back, pretending to fall asleep, though every part of me was wide awake. By morning, the storm had passed, but the silence between us lingered. He was already in the kitchen when I woke up, making coffee, like nothing unusual had happened. The smell filled the air, comforting and familiar, yet everything felt different. When our eyes met, he smiled the same easy smile he always did, but this time, it felt uncertain. I smiled back, though my chest tightened with questions I wasn't ready to ask. He handed me a mug and said, "Rough night, huh?" I nodded, pretending to laugh it off. But underneath that casual moment was something fragile and unspoken. I could tell he felt it too, the hesitation, the awareness that something invisible had shifted between us. Over the next few days, life went on as usual, at least on the surface. We still cooked dinner together, shared stories about work and life, and teased each other over little things. But the tension was always there, in the pauses between conversations, in the way our hands almost touched when we reached for the same dish. It was subtle, but impossible to ignore. One evening, we decided to take a walk by the lake near his apartment. The sun was setting, painting the water in gold and pink. We talked about old memories, college days, mutual friends, all the small things that had brought us together over the years. But even as we laughed, I could feel the weight of everything we weren't saying. He stopped at one point and looked at me, really looked at me, like he was searching for something in my expression. "You've been quiet lately," he said softly. Is everything okay? I hesitated, unsure whether to tell him the truth. How could I explain that every time he was near, my heart raced in ways it shouldn't? That I couldn't stop replaying that night in the dark, hearing his breathing, feeling that invisible pull between us? So I just nodded and said, yeah, just tired. He didn't press. He just smiled faintly and kept walking, his hands in his pockets. But as the last bit of sunlight disappeared, I caught him glancing at me again. And in that look, there was something tender, something careful, but also something dangerous. That night, I lay awake again, listening. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking of the clock and the faint hum of the city outside. I thought about how easily life can shift, how one small moment can change how you see someone forever. I didn't know what would happen next, or if either of us was brave enough to admit what we were feeling. But one thing was certain. After that night, there was no going back to how things used to be. The days that followed felt like walking on thin glass, every step careful, every word measured. What had once been easy between us now carried a strange energy, quiet but impossible to ignore. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that maybe I was imagining the way his gaze lingered a little longer than before, or how he always seemed to find reasons to be near me. But the truth was, he felt it too. I could see it in his eyes. One evening, after work, he came home looking more tired than usual. His shirt was still damp from the rain outside, his hair sticking slightly to his forehead. I was cooking dinner when he entered the kitchen, and for a while, neither of us spoke. The sound of sizzling oil filled the silence. Then, softly, he said, "You've been distant lately." I froze for a second before answering. Maybe I just needed some space. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I wasn't avoiding him because I wanted distance. I was avoiding him because being close felt too dangerous. He nodded, not arguing, but his eyes didn't leave me. "I just miss how things were," he said quietly. That simple sentence hit harder than I expected. I wanted to tell him that I missed it too, that I missed the comfort of friendship before all these feelings made everything so complicated. But my throat tightened and the words wouldn't come. Later that night, I overheard him on the phone in the living room. His voice was low but firm. "No, I haven't told her," he said. "It's not that simple." I couldn't hear who he was talking to, but the tone of his voice stirred something uneasy inside me. Was he talking about me? About us? That conversation replayed in my mind for days. The air between us grew heavier, filled with unspoken questions. Then, one weekend, he suggested we drive out of the city, to clear our heads, he said. We packed a few things and left early in the morning, heading toward a quiet cabin near the lake. The drive was long but peaceful, filled with small talk that never touched the things we really wanted to say. The cabin was cozy, surrounded by trees that whispered with the wind. At first, it felt like the break we needed. We cooked together, took walks by the water, even laughed again. But that night, as we sat by the fire, everything we'd been holding back started to surface. He stared into the flames and said softly, "Do you ever wonder if timing ruins everything?" I turned to him, unsure where he was going with it. Sometimes, I admitted. But maybe it's not about timing. Maybe it's about what we do with it. Our eyes met, and for a second, it felt like the world had stopped. The fire crackled, the night deepened, and I could feel my heart beating faster. He took a quiet breath, like he was about to say something important, but then he stopped himself. He looked away, leaving his words unfinished. That silence hung between us all night, heavier than any confession could have been. I couldn't sleep, not with all those thoughts circling my mind. What was he holding back? And what was I so afraid to admit? My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the folded note. It was just a small piece of paper, but it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. The ink was smudged in one corner, as if he'd written it in a rush, or maybe changed his mind more than once before leaving it there. I hesitated for a long time before opening it, my heart pounding with every second that passed. Inside, the message was simple. "There are things I should have told you long ago. Tonight, meet me by the lake. I'll explain everything." I must have read it a dozen times. My mind spun with questions. What did he mean by things I should have told you? Was it about that night? About his feelings? Or something deeper that I couldn't see yet? The uncertainty gnawed at me as the day dragged on. Every minute felt stretched thin, every sound in the cabin louder than usual. The ticking clock, the creak of the floorboards, the distant call of birds fading into the woods. When evening came, the air outside was thick and cool, carrying the scent of pine and rain. The lake shimmered under the fading light, its surface calm but dark, like it was holding secrets of its own. I spotted him standing near the edge, his silhouette reflected in the water. He didn't turn right away when he heard me approach. For a moment, I just watched him. There was something about the way he stood still, thoughtful, almost weighed down, that made my chest tighten. When he finally turned, his eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something in them I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't just guilt or longing, it was fear. I didn't mean for things to get like this, he said quietly. But you deserve the truth. I took a step closer. Then tell me. My voice came out softer than I expected. He looked away toward the water, the reflection of the moon cutting across his face. I wasn't honest about why I asked you to stay with me, he said. There's more to it than friendship. There always was. My heart skipped, torn between relief and confusion. But before I could respond, he added something that made my stomach drop. And that night in the dark, I wasn't asleep. The silence that followed was unbearable. The sound of the wind through the trees seemed to grow louder, sharper. I searched his face, trying to read what he wasn't saying. He took a breath, as if gathering courage. I need to tell you what I've been hiding, he whispered. But once you know, nothing between us will ever be the same. The world seemed to hold its breath with me, waiting for whatever truth was about to come. The way he said it made my pulse race. His voice was steady, but there was something behind it, a weight, a hesitation that scared me more than anything. The night air felt colder suddenly, and the stillness around the lake pressed in on us. I waited for him to go on, but for a few moments, he said nothing. Just stood there, staring at the water like it held the answers he was afraid to speak out loud. When he finally looked back at me, his expression was torn between regret and something deeper, something that looked like love but carried pain with it. There's someone else, he said quietly. The words hit harder than I wanted them to. I tried to steady my breath, tried not to let the sting show, but my voice came out sharper than I meant. Someone else. He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. It's not what you think, he added quickly. It's complicated. I laughed under my breath, though there was nothing funny about it. It always is, isn't it? I said. You let me stay, you made me feel. I stopped myself before finishing that thought. And now you tell me this? He took a step closer, his voice low. I didn't plan any of it. The night you heard me breathing beside you. I wasn't pretending to sleep because I didn't care. I was pretending because I was terrified. I've been living with a secret that's been eating at me for months. My heartbeat quickened again. There was something in the way he said secret, not like a confession of love, but like something darker, heavier. What are you talking about? I asked. He hesitated before answering. The person I was with before you came here, she disappeared. No one knows where she went. The words hung in the air, echoing in the space between us. My throat went dry. What do you mean, disappeared? He turned his gaze back to the water. They questioned me, of course. I was the last one to see her. But there was no proof, nothing that tied me to what happened. I thought I could move on, but then you came here, and everything started to feel like it was repeating. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, the sleepless nights, the strange silences, the way he sometimes looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. So you brought me here, I said slowly, to what? Replace her? He shook his head quickly. No. You have to believe me. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But being with you made me realize how close everything is to falling apart again. The sound of the wind rippled across the lake, and the firelight flickered against his face, casting shadows that made it hard to read his expression. I didn't know whether to step closer or walk away. Every instinct told me I should leave, but something in his voice kept me there. "I came out here tonight," he said finally, "to tell you the truth before someone else does. Because they've been asking about you. They know you're here with me." My breath caught. "Who's asking?" He looked toward the dark outline of the trees. The same people who never stopped looking for her. The night suddenly felt alive with sounds I hadn't noticed before, the rustle of leaves, the crack of branches somewhere deeper in the woods. My pulse pounded in my ears as he stepped closer and whispered, "You have to trust me, no matter what happens next." The air around us grew thick with tension. The night felt alive now, filled with the faint sound of footsteps, too light to be the wind, too heavy to be imagined. He turned sharply toward the trees, his body tense, eyes scanning the darkness. I could see it then, the fear he'd been trying to hide since the moment I'd found that note. "They followed us," he whispered. His voice was barely audible, but it sent chills through me. "They think I know where she is, or what happened to her." My heart raced. "But you said she disappeared." "You said you didn't." "I didn't," he cut me off, his tone desperate. "But they don't believe me. And now they think you know something too." Before I could respond, a beam of light swept through the trees, a flashlight cutting across the water. Voices followed, low and sharp, calling his name. I could feel the panic rise in my chest as he grabbed my hand. "We have to go," he said. "Now." We ran along the edge of the lake, our shoes slipping on the damp ground. The voices grew closer. I could hear the sound of breaking branches, the crack of footsteps behind us. My mind spun with questions. Who were they? What did they want from him? And most of all, why did it feel like he wasn't telling me everything even now? We reached the cabin just as the first figure stepped out of the woods. It was a man in a dark coat, his face half hidden by the light of his flashlight. "It's over," he called out. "You can't run from this anymore." I turned to him, breathless. "Who are they?" I demanded. He looked at me with that same haunted expression. "Detectives," he said softly. "But they're not here for what you think." Before I could ask what he meant, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. He handed it to me. "It's hers," he said. "They found it buried near the lake this morning." I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a photo, not of the missing woman, but of me. My mind went blank. "Why is my picture in this?" I whispered. He looked down, his voice breaking. "Because she wasn't who you thought she was. She used your name, your photos, everything. I didn't even know until after she was gone." The realization hit me like a wave. The woman who disappeared, the one they'd been searching for, had been pretending to be me. And now, they thought I was her. The men reached the cabin, their flashlights glaring through the windows. He turned to me one last time, eyes full of something between love and sorrow. "Whatever happens, don't let them take you," he said. "Run." Before I could move, the door burst open, light flooding in, and in that final instant, I didn't know who to believe anymore. The light from the flashlights was blinding. I raised my hands instinctively as the men shouted orders, their voices overlapping in the chaos. He stepped in front of me, trying to shield me, but it was too late. They had already surrounded the cabin. One of them shouted his name, and another ordered him to drop what he was holding. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped, like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us and everything we hadn't said. Then he turned toward me, his voice calm despite the panic in his eyes. "You have to believe me," he said quietly. "I didn't hurt her. I was trying to protect you." Before I could answer, the detectives pulled him away. I tried to follow, shouting his name, but one of them stopped me. The next few minutes blurred together, questions, flashing lights, the sound of car doors slamming. I told them everything, every detail I could remember. But even as I spoke, I could still see his face in my mind, the look of someone who had been carrying a truth too heavy for too long. In the days that followed, I learned more than I ever wanted to know. The woman who had disappeared, she had stolen my identity years ago for reasons no one fully understood. She had been involved in something bigger, something dangerous. He had tried to help her, but when she vanished, it left him trapped between guilt and suspicion. When he found me again, the real me, it must have felt like a second chance or maybe a warning. The detectives later confirmed he wasn't responsible for her disappearance. Evidence showed she had fled the country under another name. By the time they cleared him, he was gone. No one knew where he went, only that he left behind one final note for me at the cabin. It said, "Sometimes we meet the right person at the wrong time. If you ever think of me, I hope it's in peace, not fear." I kept that note. I still do. And every now and then, I find myself standing by that same lake, the water calm and still, thinking about how fragile trust can be and how sometimes love isn't about staying, but letting go. If you were in my place, would you have forgiven him? Or would you always wonder what was true and what was just another secret? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd want a sequel to this story, maybe one where he returns, tell me below. Summary: this story follows a woman whose quiet friendship with a man takes a mysterious turn after a stormy night when she hears his breathing beside her in the dark. What begins as an unspoken romantic tension slowly unravels into a chilling mystery involving identity theft, secrets, and trust. As hidden truths surface, she learns that love and danger can sometimes live in the same silence, and that not every truth sets you free.